try out in May 2019. Number 10 is Blood and Truth, a PSVR title that honestly is really promising. This is the kind of thing that Sony is saying that the PSVR will be compatible with the PlayStation 5, I think for a reason. This looks like a game. It's apparently on rails, which is kind of a throwback to 1990s type arcade cabinet games, but not entirely. This is a game that is designed to deliver the feel of being an action hero. It wants to conjure the types of stunts from your James Bonds, your Mission Impossibles, your Jason Bournes, the kind of one-man army type thing, and I get why they would go with the on-rails type stuff. And in truth, everything I've seen of it is pretty cool. I really used to like those type of on-rails arcade shooter cabinet games, so having that with a few more interactive elements than just that, I really think is a cool idea. And I could see myself really enjoying this, actually. Blood and Truth is a PS4 exclusive and comes out on May 28th. Number 9 is Close to the Sun, a game that I'm just gonna go ahead and say has very obvious BioShock influence, and I don't think that's a bad thing. The game takes place in 1897. It is an alternate history story in which Nikola Tesla hit it big and kind of built a Rapture but on a boat instead of at the bottom of the sea. The main character is a journalist whose sister is there. She heads for that big-ass boat, hoping to find out what happened to her, finding that nothing has gone very well on the ship. There's a huge quarantine sign, and the setup sounds familiar. However, there is no way for her to defend herself. These are ruthless people, they're armed, she's not. You basically need to avoid being killed. To me, it looks like a fantastic game. The combination of stealth and helplessness, to me, sounds like a fresh take on what looks to be a pretty realized, well-made world that seems a little familiar, but also explores a different perspective on that sort of idea. So there's enough different here and more than enough new that I think this is an interesting title. Close to the Sun is hitting the PC on May 2nd. It will also be launching on consoles sometime in Q3, so look out for that. Number 8, Layers of Fear 2. A first-person psychological horror game that is very interesting to say the least. The setup is something new. You're a Hollywood actor who's going to take the lead role in a film that takes place on an ocean liner. It's being shot on an actual ocean liner as well. It looks very much like the point of the game is to blur the lines between character and actor as you explore the ship and find more about what's going on. Possibly in the movie, possibly in your mind, possibly just in hard reality. Who really knows? That's often the point of a good story along these lines, and honestly, the visuals, I think, from what I've seen, really match up well with that kind of an idea. It certainly goes out of its way to bring us new visions, with beautiful sunsets, scary versions of those beautiful sunsets, and some pretty cool looking takes on some more serious horror imagery that maybe some people are used to, but for whatever reason it looks like a new take on it. The original Layers of Fear was about an artist trying to paint his magnum opus, and if you can imagine what it tried to do for painting in the context of acting, which by the way does have a lot of different conditions, it's a completely different craft, and you consider how good the first was, I'm really excited for this game. I will certainly play it, and I think it's going to be worth the time. Layers of Fear launches on PC, PlayStation 4, and Xbox One May 28th. Number 7 is, let's just call it a big Resident Evil package. Resident Evil, Resident Evil 0, and Resident Evil 4 all coming to the Nintendo Switch. Now these are a few pretty different games, keep in mind. Resident Evil is of course the first release in a long-running series we all know and love. Resident Evil 0 is its prequel, and Resident Evil 4 is, well, a lot of people's favorite game. All three of these games did big things for the series, obviously Resident Evil being the first, Resident Evil 0 being a GameCube game that delved further into the world, and Resident Evil 4 basically establishing the third-person shooter genre in its modern form for a lot of people. Basically, to have all of these on a Switch is a darn good deal, period. It's 3 games, 3 classics, and all of them look better than they ever did. Resident Evil 4, and Resident Evil 0 hit Nintendo Switch on May 21st. Number 6 is A Plague Tale: Innocence, which, let's just go ahead and say there's not a massive amount of information on exactly what it is, but if you've watched any of the gameplay, if you've read any of the minuscule scraps they've given, is a damn cool idea. It's basically a stealth game where there's also a plague and ravenous rats going wild at all times, you have to avoid not only hostile people, but the rats. The rats can be kept at bay with light, which means lighting a lot of fire, which means making your stealth a little more difficult. Honestly, it looks like a game where you're going to have to balance a lot of different things, and I think that sounds really interesting. I also really like what it looks like. It's grim, it's old school, it takes place during the bubonic plague, or thereabouts. It is historical fiction, so you never know what's going to happen, and I like that. A Plague Tale: Innocence comes to PC, PS4, and Xbox One on May 14th. Number 5 is Team Sonic Racing, a new kart game featuring, yes, you guessed it, Sonic the Hedgehog. It's by Sumo Digital. They know what they're doing with this kind of stuff, so I trust it pretty well. I like very much the idea of kind of reinstating the Sonic Heroes dynamic of teams, except they're limiting it to 2, and it sort of exists as a means to pull off various different moves while having 2 cars interact. One of the more obvious ideas is a slingshot drift kind of move that uses the wind stream, or I'm assuming does. It doesn't really matter what the physics excuse is, it matters how it plays, which I'm quite interested in. Obviously, the Sonic and Sega All-Star Racing games were quite good. Sumo developed those, and although this sort of restricts the roster specifically to Sonic, I don't know that's necessarily a bad thing. Team Sonic Racing is hitting PC, Switch, PS4, and Xbox One on May 21st. Number 4 is Total War 3 Kingdoms, which is a game we've had our eyes on for a while now. It's obviously a Total War game set in the Three Kingdoms era of China's history, and gives 2 different modes. First, Romance, which is based on the novel Romance of the Three Kingdoms, and Records, which is based on Records of the Three Kingdoms, which isn't a novel, more a Chinese historical text. Now, a lot of the conventions of Total War, being it's a turn-based strategy, real-time tactics game, probably are going to be mostly intact here, but there is more of a focus on characters, whether you're playing in Records or Romances, as they have generals, and these characters will be interacting, and the game actually centers on forming relationships between the characters and people they meet throughout the campaign. This is kind of diplomatic, strategic, extra stuff that we really haven't seen in a Total War game, and I'm quite interested to see how it pans out. I would say it's probably going to pan out well, though there really isn't a bad Total War game, and this is kind of a setting that's like just ripe for a Total War game. And Total War 3 Kingdoms is hitting PC on May 23rd. Number 3 is Observation, another game that really actually looks unique. I'm excited at the number of kind of trying something new type games we're seeing in May. What we have in Observation is a sci-fi thriller. Now, it's not any normal space station thing goes wrong, where you play as a human and try to get yourself through it. You actually are the space station. You're the artificial intelligence, and you have to operate tools, control systems, cameras, and assist the actual human participants in getting through a happening that threatens the whole thing. Honestly, it looks like a kind of good framework for a kind of point-and-click sci-fi thriller. Obviously, it's not going to play out exactly like that. It's a PS4 game on top of being a PC game. So more or less, I'm kind of just interested exactly in how this works. I don't think that it's like a shocking new kind of game, but it does look like it's going to try to experiment with some of the conventions of perspective in games, and I like that a lot. Observation is coming to PS4 and PC on May 21st. Number 2 is Pathologic 2, an adventure game that is obviously intended to be quite freaky. It began as a full remake that was attempting just for basically a one-to-one upgrade of the original game, but it's now being billed as a total reimagining. So story elements could be changed, elements of the game could be changed, and so on and so forth. The idea is to mix some elements of Russian culture, pre-1917 revolution, with some survival horror, adventure type ideas, and honestly, as somebody who isn't super familiar with the first game, there's a lot here that I find interesting, and I want to sort of prod into it a little more. It is going to be split into parts. The first part is hitting Windows, PlayStation 4, and Xbox One on May 23rd. And finally, number 1 is Rage 2, kind of, I think, probably a redemptive game for Rage. id Software kind of made a semi-open world game with Rage. Not really. They tried to incorporate different concepts into kind of a mishmash, and while the game wasn't bad, and it had a lot of personality, and elements of it were very good, its aspirations were a bit different than the final product. So id Software teamed up with Avalanche Studios to create a more open world, kind of Carnage-based game that in some ways feels reminiscent of Just Cause, but as Rage. Now, this is a game I think that probably is going to give us the majority of what it is after it comes out. They've basically given us a lot of footage, some gameplay, some sort of promotional materials, and the point is to show us dynamic systems and story elements in the game itself and let it speak for itself. I think it's going to as well. Honestly, I think it looks like a big step up from the original Rage, and I'm excited that there's an open world, just pure single player shooter coming out that may have a good story, I hope. I'm not terribly worried about the gameplay. Like I said, Avalanche knows what they're doing with that. Rage 2 is hitting PC, PS4, and Xbox One on May 14th. As a quick bonus for you, Conan Unconquered, a Stronghold RTS, billed as a real-time survival strategy game where you build a base and then defend it against endless hordes. It actually looks pretty interesting. I like the idea of a survival RTS. Obviously, in some ways, that's kind of like a tower defense, but I'm guessing controls much closer to an RTS. It's a game that comes to us from Petroglyph, which has former members of Westwood Studios, the Command and Conquer company. They previously made Star Wars Empire at War, and I'm definitely looking forward to it. Conan Unconquered hits Steam on May 30th. What games are you looking forward to in May? Leave us a comment, tell us what you think, and if you like this video, click the like button. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week, and the best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription. As always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter @FalconTheHero, and we'll see you next time right here on GameRanks.